Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here, and it is the end of April, so you know what that means. We are going to be reacting to my April TBR video, as in the list of books I was hoping to get to in the month of April. Did I accomplish my reading list? Stay tuned to find out. If you'd like to see that video in its entirety, it's pretty short. I'll have it linked above, but I will be inserting clips here of the footage itself as I'm watching it. Hannahception a little bit here, so you can see what I said about the book, and then I will tell you in current day what I thought about if I got to it. So let's get started. Got my headphones and we'll see how this works. Got my iPad here. Let's watch me from the past. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here, and I'm doing something I've never done before. It's true. And that is create a monthly TBR. A TBR is the list of books you want to read for that month in particular. Wow, look at how much my hair has grown out. I'm looking a little shaggy by comparison. The first book I want to get to is The Stars Undying by Emery Robin, and now this is a space opera queer retelling of the lives of Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, and Mark Antony. Now this is the start to a series. Okay, I'm paused myself. So I did manage to read The Stars Undying by Emery Robin, and I ended up giving this like a 3.5 or a 4-star. It did deliver on a lot of its promises as being kind of a political sci-fi retelling of the story of Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, and Cleopatra, at least the part 1 of that story, which is Julius Caesar's relationship with Cleopatra. And in this book, the characters are named Gracia and Siran, and the audiobook was really good with this because each of the characters had their own different narrator, which was really well done. This was political, but I guess I prefer my politics to be at court, and the characters didn't really get to court until 60 or 70% into the book. I did feel this book had like some pacing issues. Typically highly political books are slow paced, but this one just didn't quite work for me in its pacing, even though I'm usually a huge fan of political. So I'm giving it like a 3.5, 4 stars. Like, it was still really good. It just wasn't my favorite read of the month. The next book. Next we have Paladin's Strength and Paladin's Hope by T. Kingfisher. I read Paladin's Grace in December, and it was my favorite, one of my favorite books of the year. So true. I absolutely loved the fantasy romance of this book, and in these two books, it's a series, but we are following different characters that are connected to our main characters from Paladin's Grace, and it's fantasy romances for these two characters as well. So I did manage to read Paladin's Strength and Paladin's Hope, not only these two books, but I also reread Paladin's Grace in preparation to dive into these two books, and I had a great time with my reread, and I also really enjoyed my time reading both of these books. I actually have a reading vlog that I just posted if you'd like to know my further thoughts and feelings, but I gave Paladin's Strength 4 stars, and I gave Paladin's Hope 3.5 out of 5 stars. So we'll move on to the next books. Speaking of series, I want to complete / catch up on the Murderbot series. I read books 1 and 2 in January and February respectively, and in March I didn't get to anything by Martha Wells or the Murderbot series, and so in April I want to read the 3rd and 4th novella, the 5th book, which is a full-length novel, and then the 6th book, which is back to a novella. Rogue Protocol, Exit Strategy, Network Effect, and Fugitive Telemetry by Martha Wells. And I did read all 4 of these stories. I much prefer Murderbot as novellas, personally. I think the full-length novel, again, had some pacing issues that I didn't totally love, and I think we lose some of like some elements of like the found family vibe that you kind of find in Murderbot. But I think the novellas were still really strong, and I still enjoyed Network Effect. It just wasn't my favorite installment of the series. The 7th Murderbot book is coming out this year, and it's another full-length novel, and I don't think I'm going to get into it. I'm not sure. It's a maybe on my list. The other thing to note is that the novellas should be read first. Before you read Network Effect, you should read Fugitive Telemetry, because in a linear fashion, it comes before in terms of timeline. So that kind of threw me off, and that I still really enjoyed my time reading these. I think every one of the books I gave like a 3.5, 4-star. I think number 2 of the Murderbot series is still my favorite with a 4.5 out of 5 stars, but I think this is still a really solid sci-fi series, and it's really fun and quick and action-packed, and Murderbot is so sassy. The lowest rated one is Network Effect, and I only gave that one 3 stars. What? Next, Behemoth, I'm going to try to tackle is A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. Now, Prior to the Orange Tree, which is the first book in this series, whereas A Day of Fallen Night is the prequel, I didn't love Priory. I gave Priory a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was good, but it definitely had some pacing issues. And I know we love fantasy standalones, but honestly, Priory probably could have been a series. Should have very easily a series, and we could have explored some things. Yeah, I feel a lot of the same feelings about Prior to the Orange Tree, the first book in the series, as I do about A Day of Fallen Night. But I did not finish A Day of Fallen Night. I read 30% of this book, which is like 260, 280 pages, before I decided to give up, because I couldn't connect to this writing style. It was so high fantasy and epic and distant from the characters that I didn't feel much of anything for any of these characters. So you're following a whole cast of characters, which is something typically I don't love anyway, and then it's written with such narrative distance and such like, I'm an epic fantasy novel. Like, it had kind of a uppity style to it that it just kept me so distant from these characters, and I didn't, by 260 pages in, I should care about somebody, and I didn't really see myself enjoying the rest of it personally. So I did not finish this book, so technically I failed my TBR, but I think I did give it a fair shot. On to the next one. I'm also going to try and tackle Ocean's Echo by Everina Maxwell.
Oh, right. This was the first book
I read of Winter's Orbit, which was one of my favorite sci-fi queer romance stories, and this is Everina Maxwell's newest release. It's in the same universe, but it's following different characters, and it's a new romance. This does have an element of psychic powers where there's a character that can read minds, which for some reason is something I tend to steer clear of, but we'll see how Everina Maxwell pulls it off in this work. After listening to that, I can definitely say that in order for a psychic power romance to work for me is if there is more to the character dynamic and there's more bringing these two characters together other than the psychic powers. I think the powers were interesting, and that, like, essentially the magic system in this sci-fi was interesting and well fleshed out and well done, to be honest. It was just, the reason I don't like psychic powers in books, typically in romance specific, is because it kind of takes the place of actual connection. It's like, oh, we're fated to be together. We are, psychically linked, and that's supposed to stand in for emotional intimacy. And I just don't buy it if I don't see the characters actually like getting together, falling in love without. It feels like a crutch to me, is I think what I'm trying to get at. It feels like it's an easy way to make the characters connected to each other without doing the work. So I probably wasn't set up to love this book, and I didn't love this book. It's also very military sci-fi, because the two characters end up, one is like a commander in the military and the other one joins the army, like joins him. So it also, military fantasy and military sci-fi is not my favorite either. So I think this one just was not my cup of tea. I ended up giving it 3 stars, but you know, you may like it if, you know, those types of things don't bother you. Of course, being April 1st when I'm filming this, I am definitely going to read Brandon Sanderson's Secret Project number 2. I have no idea what this is about. I don't even know what the title is at this point, but you bet your bottom dollar I will be reading the new Brandon Sanderson book out. I have the audiobook and the ebook, and what I did with Sanderson's first Secret Project is I read the ebook and followed along while I listened to the audiobook, and that was a really I did enjoy the audiobook ebook combo reading experience of this. However, this is also part of the Paladin's Strength and Paladin's Hope reading vlog. I didn't really love this book. I ended up giving it like 3 stars. It just, the plot was boring to me, is all I'll say. It just didn't quite land. I thought the plot was boring. Moving on rather swiftly from that, another book that I own that I'd like to get to is Sister Maiden Monster by Sister Maiden Lucy Snyder. This is a horror sci-fi thriller. So this was another one I made progress in. I actually have the book, hold on. I mean, it's hard to tell with this bookmark, but I did make progress. I read a couple more chapters in this book. I'm only like 36 pages into it overall. When I tried reading this a couple months ago when I first got it, I think the writing was just not gripping me. And then after reading a few more chapters, the writing is still not really gripping me. And I think when I read books with my eyeballs, the writing has to be pretty good on another level in order for me to enjoy it. Like, if I could listen to this, I could probably fly through it and have a good time, but because I'm reading it with my eyeballs, I'm just noticing some writing things that aren't my cup of tea when it comes to writing when consuming a story. But I do kind of want to finish this because it is super, super queer. It's following 3 separate women in a pandemic, post-apocalyptic zombie thing. And they kind of become intertwined, and one is like a sex worker, and I appreciate like that representation. And there's a lot of like chronic illness representation in here because obviously we're dealing with a pandemic in this book. So this might not be a DNF forever, but if I could get my hands on the audiobook, I might pick this up, but physically I don't think I can get through it. The last book I'm going to be talking about, which is the 12th book on this list, if you've been keeping track, is my one nonfiction I'm going to try and read every month, and that is Braiding Sweetgrass. This is an Indigenous work about Indigenous sciences in the environment, and I read a similar book a few months ago and really enjoyed it, and I would like to get this author's perspective. So I read 25% of this audiobook, and I'm still making my way through it. I still plan on continuing my read of this. It's super, super well written. It's almost like consuming poetry, though. It's part memoir, part science narrative, part Indigenous storytelling. Like, the author is weaving in a lot of elements into this nonfiction, and I don't think I was expecting that. And the author is also a poet, and you can really tell with her prose that she is also a poet. And I'm just reading it slowly. And I started it kind of at the end of the month. So if I had started it at the beginning of the month, I could have probably finished it by the end, but I think I started it like the second to last week, or the last week of April, and I want to take my time with this one. So this one I'm still working my way on. So I plan to finish this one soon. Again, I just want to take my time a little bit with it. I did read quite a few of the books on my TBR. I DNF'd technically 3 with the intention of returning to 1, maybe 2 of them. In total, I think I've read 21 books in April, so we have a few more books to talk about, but that will be a separate video. I definitely felt this pressure of wanting to just pick up and put down things and not have to tell you about them. Like, I don't really tell you about all the books I DNF or try, you know, pick up and I read like 2 pages or 2 chapters or 50 pages and I end up giving up. I don't talk about those all the time on my channel, and so I have to fess up to all of you. It was an interesting experiment to do for a month. I don't know if I can keep doing it every single month. I think the stress would get to me and I can go back to my chaotic reading self. Maybe I'll try this again at some point, but this was kind of a fun and interesting challenge, and I think I did pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. I really hope you enjoyed this experiment, and thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video, which is going to be talking about the rest of the books I read in April. Bye!